New York City pledged $5 billion to host the world's most watched sporting event, an investment so vast it fundamentally reshaped the city's infrastructure. This massive project saw Manhattan install 2,000 new smart traffic sensors, a 300% jump in data collection capabilities, a leap to multiplying your phone's storage by 2000. Hudson Yards, once an industrial relic, became a sprawling fan zone covering 28 acres, a space larger than 21 football fields, while 12 new homeless shelters were funded, providing beds for 1,800 individuals. It was more than just a game. It signaled a major overhaul. Over 150,000 workers were mobilized to upgrade everything from subway lines to airport terminals. Port Authority alone invested $2.5 billion in transportation, linking fans from Newark Liberty to MetLife Stadium. The MTA added another $1.8 billion for subways, a sum equivalent to constructing about 30 brand-new Empire State buildings. MetLife Stadium itself received a $750 million renovation, adding 8,000 seats. Security transformed into a three-tiered system involving federal, state, and city agencies, with $400 million dedicated to coordination. Public safety initiatives received $120 million, equipping 50 new mobile response units. Beyond the physical upgrades, $90 million revitalized 75 acres of parks, creating new spaces like 25 Bryant Parks. $50 million fueled the arts, sponsoring 200 varied programs. $30 million was allocated for citywide cleanups, targeting 90% removal of event refuse. $15 million provided temporary housing for over 5,000 staff. And looking ahead, the city saw extensive 5G network expansion and public Wi-Fi deployment. Global viewership projections hit 5 billion, 50 times the Super Bowl audience, promising a tourism surge and unprecedented exposure. Experts predicted a colossal $10 billion economic impact, drawing 1.5 million international visitors. Thousands of new jobs, 12,000 by estimate, were on the horizon, mainly in hospitality and retail. The World Cup was meant to cement New York's status as a premier global city, attracting future events and investments for decades. Local businesses anticipated growth, with sales potentially tripling. Organizers planned extensive community engagement involving 50,000 volunteers and hundreds of youth programs. Beyond the final whistle, proponents highlighted a lasting legacy of improved infrastructure and sustained international recognition. This was more than just a sporting event. It was a grand vision for a global stage, a gamble, a massive bet on a future that shimmered brighter than any skyscraper's peak. But how do you quantify the intangible value of global prestige? It's like betting your entire life savings on a single lottery ticket, but with city-sized stakes. Imagine 100,000 volunteers. This transformation promised a cultural exchange, fostering a global village feel across all 5 boroughs. The sheer scale of it was staggering, like trying to juggle 100 million footballs. This was the promise New York amplified. Mayor Evelyn Reed, "This isn't just a game, it's our future." Behind every monumental undertaking is a visionary, and for New York's World Cup bid, Mayor Evelyn Reed stood at the forefront. Her journey began not with a stadium blueprint, but with a conviction that hosting the 2026 World Cup final was a generational opportunity. She envisioned a city transformed, a global stage showcasing New York's resilience and ambition. Reed leveraged her political capital, orchestrating 120 strategic meetings. That's more than 2 every single week for an entire year, securing key endorsements from powerful figures and organizations. She didn't just sell a dream, she presented a concrete plan, boldly promising 90% of local businesses would see direct economic benefits. This figure significantly boosted public and private sector confidence. Reed's rallying cry, "This isn't just about 2026, it's a 50-year investment in our future," resonated deeply, not just with potential investors, but with every New Yorker who believed in the city's enduring spirit. This was more than a bid. It was a declaration of intent, a commitment to build a legacy. New York offered a jaw-dropping $1.5 billion financial guarantee, enough to make even seasoned accountants do a double take. London, of course, had already hosted the 2012 Olympics and came with 8 stadiums already good to go, double New York's immediate stadium capacity. Tokyo then threw in their own astonishing $750 million guarantee, a fiscal promise that really squeezed the competition. But the real fight wasn't just about what each city already possessed. It was about what they were willing to pledge. New York's bid team worked 18-hour days for 2 solid years, outplaying 11 other cities. They agreed to cover 60% of FIFA's operational costs for the final match, a commitment close to $150 million. FIFA also demanded 40% of future event revenue from ancillary services, a non-negotiable point that New York eventually had to concede. London was already 70% ready with its infrastructure, thanks to its Olympic legacy, while New York began from a much lower 35% readiness, promising huge upgrades. Tokyo, meanwhile, highlighted its smooth public transportation, boasting a 98% on-time metro network. So, how do you convince a global governing body that your city, still very much a work in progress, is the right choice? New York's answer was a fan-zone-first strategy, promising 20 dedicated fan parks across all 5 boroughs that could hold 1.5 million visitors. MetLife Stadium was guaranteed to seat at least 82,500, a full 2,500 over FIFA's requirement. The city also committed to a zero-waste final, vowing to divert 95% of event waste from landfills. Even with all this enthusiasm, 30% of local residents were against the bid, worried about budget blowouts and traffic. New York City, 2026. To host the world's biggest sporting event, the city underwent a metamorphosis, a hyper-accelerated urban renewal driven by billions for the World Cup final. The blueprint for hosting demanded an unprecedented infrastructure overhaul. The iconic Queensboro Bridge got an $800 million expansion, adding 2 dedicated express bus lanes and doubling pedestrian capacity to 10,000 people per hour. Subway Lines 7 and E, crucial arteries to stadiums, received $350 million for signal upgrades and platform extensions designed to handle 50% more riders. Commuters responded positively, though more is always needed. The Port Authority then allocated an additional $1.2 billion for airport renovations, modernizing terminals A and B at JFK and Newark Liberty. Meanwhile, Flushing Meadows Corona Park, central to the fan experience, saw $200 million invested in green space restoration and new public amenities. Creepily, a new $45 million state-of-the-art security command center was established, integrating over 3,000 surveillance cameras across key venues. Over 500 intersections received smart traffic light systems, projected to cut travel times by 25% during peak event periods. To accommodate the influx of visitors, 15 new temporary hotel structures were approved, adding 5,000 rooms specifically for the World Cup. And Flushing Meadows Corona Park, it saw a $350 million athletic complex erected, complete with new training facilities and fan zones. Major subway lines received over $1.2 billion in upgrades, adding new tracks and modernizing stations to handle millions of international visitors daily. Public spaces like Times Square underwent significant aesthetic overhauls, costing $150 million for enhanced security features and digital display improvements. "70% of New Yorkers were against pumping more money into World Cup spending, a stark reality as costs ballooned. What began as an ambitious $750 million projection for stadium upgrades at MetLife and Citi Field spiraled, jumping another 30% due to unexpected material and labor expenses. This wasn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It meant real-world consequences. Small businesses, promised an economic bonanza, instead saw local customers disappear and rents skyrocket, their streets choked by years of construction. Environmental watchdogs raised alarms, calculating the carbon footprint at a staggering 1.5 million tons of CO2 from construction alone. That's like powering a small city for a decade. The security budget alone soared by a colossal 50%, reaching $1.8 billion, more than double what Brazil spent in 2014. How does this keep happening? Activist groups protested for 12 consecutive weeks, their calls for housing and education funding drowned out by the roar of excavators. Mayor Reed defended the escalating costs, claiming, "This investment secures New York's future for the next 50 years, despite short-term financial pain." Yet, a chilling poll revealed only 28% of residents still believed the World Cup would bring long-term benefits, a nosedive from 65% 2 years prior. Financial analysts projected NYC's debt to climb by $3.2 billion, which works out to nearly $375 per resident. This is not a small tax, it's a burden for a 2-week spectacle. It's absurd. That burden shared by a family of 4? Over $1,500 out of pocket for someone else's party. Public discontent reached a fever pitch. 68% now opposed hosting. Small businesses reported a 15% drop in local customers. Facing hardship, transit disruptions became the norm, impacting millions. New York projected 2 million attendees for its fan festivals, and let me tell you, the city's football fever was absolutely electric. As the World Cup final loomed, a massive preparation effort enveloped all 5 boroughs. Over 30 nations staged cultural showcases, turning places like Astoria, Queens into buzzing global hubs. Local street vendors saw their daily sales jump by an astonishing 75%. Over 10,000 volunteers in blue donated more than 200,000 hours just to help welcome everyone. Our most famous landmarks, the Empire State Building and One World Trade, pulsed with nightly light, shows that pulled in 500,000 spectators every week. Public art turned parks into galleries, featuring 20 massive football sculptures. The city even rolled out a multilingual app for navigation and schedules, which was downloaded 1.5 million times. Promotional merchandise sales hit over $80 million, a staggering 40% beyond what they'd predicted. Suddenly, pop-up tournaments were popping up in 50 different neighborhoods, bringing communities together. This widespread excitement covered 2,000 square miles, a scale that reminded people of the 2000 Sydney Olympics. To help bridge gaps, 150 free language classes were offered in Spanish, Portuguese, and French. It's pretty wild to think about, a city often so divided finding common ground. Parks hosted outdoor screenings of classic matches, drawing thousands to relive legendary moments, and 50 local artists contributed to a huge mural celebrating football heroes. New York's official World Cup social channels saw a surge, gaining 3 million followers as global interest spiked. Over 100 schools even integrated World Cup programs, teaching geography and sportsmanship. New York City transformed into a finely tuned machine for the World Cup final, requiring 10,000 security personnel, the largest peacetime deployment in U.S. history. 15 agencies and this massive security force orchestrated an unprecedented logistical ballet to turn a city of millions into a seamless host. Over 3.7 million fans were anticipated across 2 weeks, with 150,000 converging on MetLife Stadium for the final match day alone. Public transport saw a huge upgrade. 24-hour extensions on 12 subway lines and 10 bus routes absorbed an astonishing 2.5 million extra daily riders, like adding a small city to the commute. Security perimeters stretched 5 miles around the stadium, bolstered by 2 NYC officers and 500 state troopers. Specialized drone teams flying 30 UAVs at once kept constant aerial watch over crowd movements. Food vendors processed over 1.2 million transactions from 300 locations on match day, a real triumph for hospitality. But what happens when an entire metropolis runs at peak capacity? Waste management surged by 400%, deploying 500 extra personnel and 200 specialized collection vehicles. Contingency plans were robust, featuring 3 mobile hospitals and 50 rapid response medical teams. ready to address any emergency within 7 minutes. Over 60 hotel rooms across the 5 boroughs booked solid, injecting $250 million into local businesses. Cybersecurity operations detected and neutralized over 10,000 phishing attempts and 500 denial-of-service attacks. Even with that immense security force, the perimeters still spanned 30 square miles. On final day, an estimated 4.5 million subway rides occurred, a 150% increase, meaning 200 extra trains were needed. Fan zones across the city accommodated 2 million people, who consumed 500,000 hot dogs and 1 million gallons of water. That's enough to fill one. Nearly half the planet, 3.5 billion eyes, were glued to screens worldwide as New York transformed into the epicenter of global passion. This made the World Cup final the most-watched single sporting event ever broadcast. At MetLife Stadium, now an expanded 90,000-seat Coliseum, the roar hit 120 decibels. That's like a jet engine at takeoff, right in your ear. Visitors pumped an estimated $1.5 billion into the city's economy, pushing hotel occupancy to a staggering 98% across all 5 boroughs. Over 15,000 journalists from 180 countries broadcast the event in 40 languages, a testament to its global reach. Picture 50 different national flags waving in unison in Times Square. It was a genuine global tapestry woven in real time. Social media exploded with 700 million posts and shares trending globally for 2 solid days. Organizers processed 1,000 tons of materials aiming for high-waste diversion. It was also a diplomatic dance, as over 200 heads of state and celebrities navigated airport protocols for 72 hours. Then the game, a thrilling 3-3 tie, pushed to nail-biting 105 minutes by penalties. The Victory Parade, an 8-mile spectacle through Manhattan, drew 4 million people, the largest in city history. Global brands saw a 25% cool factor jump. New York is now a prime global event host, with 3 more major bids lined up by 2029. Billions were spent, yes, but for one electrifying month, New York delivered an experience for 5 billion people. That's a legacy far beyond dollars and cents. The final whistle blew, but the economic reports told a grim story, a $2 billion impact versus a $5 billion projection. Suddenly, the cheers faded, and reality set in. Many local businesses, particularly those beyond the official fan zones, saw sales climb only 15%, a shadow of the 50% surge they were promised. The 20,000 temporary jobs initially hyped? That number shrank to just 8,000, leaving thousands who hoped for work out in the cold. It's wild how an event meant to supercharge an economy can actually change its own people. Global viewership was massive, but only 1.2 million tourists actually came for the event, a stark drop from the 2 million expected. The $800 million Queensboro Bridge expansion did see more traffic during the games, but it failed to ease daily congestion like engineers had assured us it would. Security costs alone skyrocketed to $750 million, almost double the initial budget. To put that in perspective, $1 of that could buy 2.5 cups of coffee in Manhattan. Subway ridership did climb 30%, but delays still hit 45% of lines, which felt like a punch to the gut for commuters. Hotel occupancy reached 92% in Manhattan, but it was only 75% in the outer boroughs, a stark difference from the citywide 95% they'd forecasted. The city churned out an extra 15,000 tons of waste during the event, overloading sanitation services and boosting landfill use by 10%. Rent prices near MetLife Stadium jumped 25% temporarily, forcing some residents to find new homes. A poll after the event found a mere 40% of New Yorkers felt the World Cup was worth the expense. New York City's World Cup dream landed with a $1.5 billion debt that lingered for 5 years after the final whistle. That staggering liability meant $200 million got slashed from vital public school budgets across all 5 boroughs. The city's celebratory mood curdled as it struggled with this persistent debt, impacting essential services. Think about your own family budget taking a 15% hit to cover one big party that was New York's reality for over 5 years. Maintaining the new stadium and transit hubs ate up another quarter of the city's yearly budget. Hospital emergency rooms then saw wait times climb by half an hour on average due to staffing shortages. The city burned through over $300 million just on interest for World Cup bonds, which equaled 10% of the entire Parks Department budget. Instead of the projected $2 billion revenue, New York brought in less than $500 million, a massive 75% shortfall nobody saw coming. These financial demands held city resources captive for a whole decade, with the last bonds finally paid off in 2036. World Cup transit upgrades pulled money from daily operations, leading to 15% more subway delays across the system. Planned projects like the Brooklyn waterfront revitalization were shelved indefinitely, an estimated $500 million loss. The city's credit rating dropped twice, making future borrowing for necessities much pricier. This financial squeeze affected housing programs, mental health services, and homeless shelters citywide. Effectively, every New Yorker paid an extra $175 in taxes over 5 years to clear the world. Cup's financial ghost. It's a pretty stark look at the real price of hosting a global spectacle. New York City a decade back was drowning in $1.5 billion of debt. Yet the World Cup sparked an unexpected urban rebirth, reclaiming 750 acres of forgotten industrial land for parks. That's a lot of urban therapy. Beyond the balance sheets, surprising seeds of renewal took root. Harlem's football mile saw a 40% growth in local businesses. The transformation began with the stadiums, but the most radical legacy wasn't a sporting arena, it was those acres of repurposed land. Over 750 acres of derelict industrial sites became vibrant community parks, leading to a documented 15% drop in childhood asthma rates in adjacent neighborhoods. A completely unforeseen public health victory. Youth soccer enrollment skyrocketed by 250,000 new players citywide, and get this, 60% came from low-income families previously shut out of the sport. The temporary fan ferries, once logistical necessities for the games, became permanent fixtures. They now serve 30,000 daily commuters, connecting boroughs in ways the subway never efficiently could. It took a global sporting event to fix a specific pothole in Queens. 10 years of city council meetings couldn't achieve it. A forgotten byproduct was the Goals Art Initiative, which funded 200 permanent public murals, the largest single arts commission in city history. The citywide 6G network, built for event data, now provides free high-speed internet to 1.2 million public housing residents daily. Unlike the ghost stadiums of other hosts, 95% of NYC's venues were existing structures or designed for immediate community conversion. It was a masterclass in pragmatic urbanism, long after the final whistle blew. New York hosted the World Cup final in 2026, and by 2029, Brooklyn was already welcoming over 40,000 new residents from major soccer nations, which fundamentally altered its cultural fabric. These arrivals weren't just fans. They were families seeking new lives, drawn by the energy and vibrant opportunities the city now offered. Quickly, new restaurants, cultural centers, and small businesses catering to diverse tastes emerged, transforming once sleepy avenues into bustling hubs. Think of your local deli suddenly replaced by a taqueria, a bakery, and a specialty tea shop, all on the same block. This rapid gentrification, however, triggered a significant shift. Average rents in some Brooklyn districts spiked by a staggering 35% in just 5 years. Longtime residents, especially low-income families, found themselves priced out. A stark reminder that progress often carries a steep social cost. The median household income for these new residents was 25% higher than for existing populations, creating stark economic divisions. It's like a new economic ceiling suddenly appeared. In response, local activist groups like the Brooklyn Collective formed, advocating for affordable housing and cultural preservation initiatives. Demographic shifts were staggering. Some neighborhoods saw a 200% increase in non-English-speaking households, between 2026 and 2031. Public schools adapted, introducing new bilingual education programs in 8 Brooklyn districts, accommodating students from over 50 nations. Property values near the World Cup Stadium precinct experienced the fastest growth in NYC history, a record-breaking 70% appreciation in a decade. The World Cup truly served as a powerful catalyst, accelerating Brooklyn's transformation from a working-class borough into a global, multicultural mosaic. Yet the affordability crisis meant nearly 1/5 of Brooklyn residents now spend over 50% of their income on rent. New York saw a 45% surge in cultural tourism revenue, completely reshaping its economic identity. Those billions spent for the World Cup were more than just stadium funding. They were a calculated investment in reinvention. Now, an average of 10 major international sporting events fill the calendar annually, which is 5 times more than before. This wasn't just about hosting a game, it was about forging a new global brand. New York transformed from a financial hub into a bona fide sports and culture powerhouse. Annual tourism jumped by a remarkable 15% post-event, proving this transformation ran deeper than the surface. Within 2 years, over 30 new arts and sports initiatives bloomed, drawing in a vibrant, younger, global demographic. Even neighborhoods like Harlem's Football Mile saw property values climb 40% in 5 years, though this success predictably brought its own wave of gentrification. Global brands took notice, lining up to bid for 10 international championships in the next decade. The city had undeniably rebranded itself. This infrastructure, costing $2 billion for the Cup, spurred an additional $8 billion in private development across all 5 boroughs, a very real glow-up. But evolution has its price. Local businesses, struggling against massive sponsorships, faced a 25% closure rate in prime tourist zones. Was the $3.5 billion global viewership really worth that cost? At NYU, urban planning and sports management enrollment climbed 30%, with students eager to help build this new New York. Building a community from scratch, that's what these new sports centers represent. Think about it. From a financial district to a global sports arena, that's the new New York, forever reimagined. New York sunk over $5 billion into the World Cup, a global spectacle they hoped would pay off for everyone. 5 years later, though, the city was still wrestling with a $1.5 billion debt, enough to build 1,500 new schools. It's kind of wild to think about that much money just sitting there, tied up for a decade. Oddly enough, the city's GDP actually grew by 0.8% annually for those 5 years, beating out other host cities for mega events. That was an economic ripple effect nobody saw coming. And despite the financial strain, 7 years on, 70% of New Yorkers felt the World Cup had boosted the city's reputation long-term. Public opinion, though mixed at first, definitely turned around. Physically, the areas around the main stadiums got a serious upgrade. New parks, better public housing, and 20 miles of walking paths. The event also pushed for greener infrastructure, with 80% of new transit projects using sustainable tech. It's amazing how a sports event can trigger such wide-ranging improvements. The World Cup final essentially became a blueprint for future city planning, cited 15 times in major global reports by 2030. Lessons were definitely learned, and New York became a leader in hosting big international events, holding 5 major conferences on the subject since 2026. That was the city's fresh expertise. So, New York's World Cup experience shows that massive spending leads to massive transformation, for good or for ill. Culturally, the city welcomed a more diverse soccer following, seeing a 20% rise in Latin American and European communities. It's a complicated legacy, really. A monument to big dreams, a warning about costs, and undeniably a driver of lasting change.